Level design is kind of a beast. You spend all this time giving your characters these movement abilities and combat abilities, and then you have to create these environments that somehow test all of those abilities and look nice and can contribute to the storytelling in the game. But in the case of a roguelike, and especially a roguelike with platformer characteristics, the variety is where a lot of the replayability comes from. And that's what I set out to fix. In this video, I'm going to take you through the old level generation system, show you all the problems with it, and then how I fixed them. So let's go! I'm Dryden Thomas, and I'm developing Disinherited. It's a Victorian side-scrolling action roguelike where you throw, catch, and parry your way through Death's domain to slay the Grim Reaper and claim eternal life, all to spite your father, who cut you out of his will. So here's the old system. You have a bunch of hand-designed tile chunks, all of them 16 tiles wide and 16 tiles tall. They all have 2 empty tiles on the 8th and 9th squares of each side, up, down, left, and right. This is so they can all be placed next to each other and they'll be traversable in any direction, although there are a couple where you can't go up. That's not a problem though because of the way the overall levels are laid out, and I'll explain that soon. You've probably noticed these other weird tiles in here. These are a special type of tile I made called spawner tiles that just tell what can be placed there. You've got hazards, enemies, power-ups, or references to specific game objects that get cloned and put in there. There are also these numbers ones that used to tell what kind of decorations could be put there, but I have a different system for that now, but I have no reason to get rid of them, so here they are. Once I have a tile chunk designed, I save it off to be used by the level generator. Here's how that works. With the old level generator, you would give it a size of level that you wanted it to create, and it would essentially slot in as many chunks as you gave it for the height and width. The standard size was 4x4 for a 16 chunk level, but for the first few levels in the demo, I used smaller sizes like a tall 1x4 column to help guide the player downward. The generator then chooses a random top slot to use as the entrance and a random bottom slot to use as the exit. Next, we go around this entire grid and kind of paint it with tiles, because you don't want to be able to see off the edge of the map. And the last bit is it hollows out 2 2x15 tunnels by the entrance and the exit. And that's why it's okay that some of the tile chunks you can't go upward, because your goal is always down. After that, it just recursively calls generate next chunk until all of them are full. There's also a chance that it'll invert all the tiles across the y-axis. That's it for the basic layout, but now we need all the other stuff. In the entity spawning phase, we get to use all those weird tiles from the tile chunk. We walk through each of them, and whenever we hit a spawner tile, we follow a set of instructions to make that thing appear in that spot. On the power-up tiles, we have a random chance to spawn a bead, a relic, or a helpful holdable like a torch or a scythe. On enemy tiles, we have a chance to spawn an enemy, depending on the enemy density setting in the level data. Last is the most complicated step, the decorations. I have these sets of rules that I call cover-up layouts. They look like this, with the white representing ground, the black representing air, and the green representing either one. For each tile in the map, we basically scan through to see if the layout fits, and if it does, we're going to put in one of the matching decorations. Then we go back and tell the decor map which tiles we just decorated, so another decoration won't overlap it. Then we start over fresh with the background decorations because we don't mind if the background and the midground decorations overlap. Okay, so that's the old system. Let's talk about the major limitations. The first overarching problem is with the tile chunk design. Since they all have to be the same size with exits in the same places, there are hard limits on what types of challenges you can create. Say you want a long room where you jump from platform to platform over spikes. You can only fit a few platforms in before you have to make a break to open to the area below. And even if you can configure something like that, the reward for doing it has to be nestled very carefully in the corner. The truth of the exit placement is that you're really working with more like 7x7 areas, which is hardly enough space for a serious challenge and reward. The need to be traversed in every direction also makes it much harder to create open spaces where you might stage a little combat arena, for example. The kind of space that would be perfect to fight last devlog's bone golem in. Another issue is that it's really tough to put in any optional content. I can't include a challenge that uses some of the more interesting physics maneuvers, or requires you to have double jumps or be carrying a torch, because that could create an unbeatable level if it gets put in the wrong spot. And here's a sneaky problem, the rewards. The way the tile chunks are spread out, some of them have 1 and some have 2 power-up squares. The number of enemies is also random. This leads to an unevenness in the economy of the game that will create balance problems. Now, unevenness in a roguelike can be actually very fun, but as a designer, I want to give myself tools so that the unevenness comes from what you're offered and not how much you're offered. Here's another problem. variety. When every level has to be rectangular with an entrance at the top and an exit at the bottom, it's going to be really hard to make different areas feel different from each other. Now, I could just accept this as a limitation and find other ways. I mean, it worked fine for Spelunky. But I love the way that in Rogue Legacy 2 or Dead Cells, each area has its own logic to the layout. And the variety isn't just between areas, it's also within them. I've already introduced this concept in Disinherited's demo about the Reaper chasing you through certain parts of the level. I made the design for this area much more horizontal, so it's 4 chunks wide and 1 chunk tall. But a couple players, notably the Disinherited speedrunner Time Looper, pointed out that these sections didn't feel like they were designed for horizontal movement, and also that it was a shame because the horizontal movement in the game is actually really fun. So let's reframe all these problems as a wish list of what we want the next level generator to be able to do. First, I want tile chunks that don't have to exit every direction. Second, I want to be able to put those exits anywhere on that side, not just right in the middle. Third, I want to be able to do tile chunks of different sizes. Fourth, I want to be able to create new floor plans for areas that aren't just grids of tile chunks. Fifth, I want to be able to design tile chunks with specifically those floor plans in mind. And sixth, I want the ability to more directly control the spawning of important power-ups in each level. And all it took was a few days of relentless programming. So here's a rough overview of how it works. There are also definitely simpler solutions to some of these problems, but where's the fun in that? So first, we need more data. When you save a tile chunk, it now remembers which directions it has exits for and exactly where those exits are. That helps the generator know exactly where to place it in relation to its neighbor. Before we start the generation, we get to define a bunch of parameters. First, we decide what gets spawned, how many beads, how many relics, and how many holdables. We also get to decide the general floor plan of the area using these things I call build shapes. There are 5 of them right now: the tower, the pit, the right corridor, the left corridor, and the snake. Towers go up, pits go down, corridor right goes right, corridor left goes left, and the snake just always adds on to whatever one you placed last, but in any direction. Don't worry about box yet, it's not done. We then create a list of build stages. A build stage is just a number of tile chunks that are going to be placed in one of these aforementioned shapes. Then we can start the generation. First, we're going to gather up all of the valid tile chunks into a list. We choose one that's marked as a starter, and then we place it in this sort of imaginary tile map at coordinates 0, 0. Next, we figure out which direction we're going to go, and the build shape determines what that is. The build shape also gives us some rules for what the next tile placed has to be. For example, if we're building a tower, the next one up also has to have an upward exit. Once we find a valid tile chunk and we place it in this imaginary tile map, we mark the exit that we just used as closed. We keep building until we're at the end of the first build stage, and then we're going to find a branch point. We're going to pick one of the available exits, and we're going to try to place something there. If it fits and it's going to work, then we're going to go forward. If not, we're going to close that exit and try to find a different branch point. If at any time the generator fails to find a valid placement, we're going to shut the whole thing down and start over. After all the build stages are done, we're going to go through and spawn our entities. Most importantly, the entrance and the exit. Because we have lots of different map shapes to work with now, they're not all going to exit downwards. We're going to have to use doors, so I drew these ones to make a quick entrance and exit. The entrance is always going to be held in that starter chunk, and we're going to use the decoration layouts from earlier to find a valid spot to put it. Then we've got to find the exit point. We look through all of the chunks that are at the end of various branches, which I've marked as terminal. For now, the exit just gets put in the furthest away terminal placement from the entrance. Because the entrance and exit are absolutely critical, if we for some reason can't find a place for either of these, we're going to start over again. Then we spawn in the power-ups. This time, rather than looking through every single power-up spawner tile and replacing it with a random something, we have a pre-arranged number of beads or relics or holdables, and we're going to look through those spots to find places to place them. Same deal with enemies. Last, we go through and decorate the tile map, just like last time. I'm going to leave it at that and ignore the fact that it took me an entire day, maybe 2, to refigure out how this system works and adapt it to my new one. I also wrote a little randomization script so that there can be some wiggle room. Honestly, I'm thrilled with the way this turned out. I can give myself as much or as little control over the layout as I want, and no doubt there are lots of other passes that I could build in. For example, I could probably take the exits that end up close to each other but not touching and create tunnels between them. Or I can write another pass that will graft on special reward or challenge rooms to the edges of the map. The options are literally limitless at this point. Another thing that's awesome is how fast this thing is. Normal levels with maybe 30 tile chunks in them take a fraction of a second to generate. When I took it up to an absolutely absurd stress test, it generated a 3000 by 1500 grid of over 4 million tiles. It still only took about 30 seconds. Additionally, this is definitely the largest programming challenge I've ever had to tackle, and so it's very gratifying to have created something like this all by myself. So, there's a very high-level overview. I did a little poll last week asking how in-depth you wanted me to be in this video, and a lot of people said that they wanted a lot of detail. But since I've been working on this for so long, I figured why not make 2 videos. One for people who already like Disinherited and just want to know how things are going to work broadly, and another video for the people who may be interested in the programming aspects of it, but may or may not know about or care about the game. So next time you can expect that video. Thank you so much to my channel members for supporting my descent into madness, most notably Emil Scove in the Ascended Lighthoof tier and AJ Havoc in the Reaper Council. See y'all in the next one.